Now, as the year is wrapping up, I thought it would be a great idea to look back and compare all the no-code tools that I've reviewed on this channel this year, as well as the previous years as well. Now, this comparison is going to be partly objective and partly subjective. It's going to be objective because I'm going to be actually looking at each of the tools' functionalities, whether it supports a specific feature, whether it's able to do something that you needed to do in order to build apps quickly and easily. But it's also going to be partly subjective, and that is because I've been using lots and lots of tools. And not only using, I've been building apps with a lot of these tools. I've been digging deep. And obviously, there are tools that I like more than others. There are tools that I feel are just easier to work with compared to others. There are tools that I like personally better than others. And obviously, this is a channel where I don't want to give you pure generic advice. I actually want to share with you my experience as well as my opinions. And so having said that, let's begin. Now, the first tool I want to talk about is Bubble, okay? Bubble is a tool that I got started with on this channel. This is one of the first tools that I started to review back when I started this channel some years back. And Bubble is probably one of the more popular tools when it comes to building no-code apps. And so I have a bunch of apps here. I've been using Bubble for quite a while now. And obviously, there are some things that I really, really like about Bubble, and there are also things that I do not like about Bubble. And so now, having looked at all the other tools, I do see tools that are better than Bubble. Okay, Bubble is not the #1 tool that I'm using at the moment. But still, this is a good tool to kind of get started with. It's a good tool to kind of, get your feet wet when you're starting out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it an A. Okay, I'm not going to give it the top rating because in my opinion, there are some things that other tools do better, but I'm going to give it an A rating. And just like with all the tools I'm going to be comparing today, I reserve the right to kind of change the rating later on, okay, as I'm comparing these tools. The next tool I want to compare is AppGyver, okay? So AppGyver was the second tool that I started to review on this channel. And AppGyver is a great tool. I sometimes feel that AppGyver does not really get the praise or the recognition that it deserves. It's in some ways an underrated tool because it seems to me that the people who built this tool went to great lengths in order to kind of build an amazing tool. There's a lot of functionality, right? You have just really great ways of building a UI. You have data connections. You have very nice logic. It's a very, very intuitive tool, and it's built very nicely. They have bindings. It's a great, great tool. But having said that, this is definitely not going to be a tool that I'm going to be using to build my apps, because while it's great from like this technical perspective, I feel it's not as intuitive. The UI, it does leave a lot to be desired. I would prefer it to have more widgets. I would just prefer to have it be a little bit more user-friendly. So this is like one of the tools that, I would just give to someone if they're learning how to do no code. But me personally, I would never build an app using AppGyver. It's just not polished enough when it comes to building the apps that I want to build. And I think many of you will definitely agree with me there. And so where are we going to rate AppGyver? Well, it's going to be either B or C. I'm going to give it a B because at the end of the day, I do have like a soft spot for AppGyver, right? I do like AppGyver. It's a great tool. It has served me well. So that is what we're going to give it. The next tool I want to talk about is Adalo. Okay, Adalo was another tool that I began kind of working with a while ago. I built all kinds of apps using Adalo, and I built simple apps. I built a little more complex apps. I even built like a Tinder app with Adalo, which I do not recommend anybody try to do it because it's just going to be a headache. It's really not meant for that. And so what I like about Adalo, and in my opinion, Adalo is a great tool. Okay, I really, really like it. It's an easy tool to build CRUD apps, okay, CRUD, and these are your simple apps where you have a list of something, you have details, you have to add a new item, you have to delete it. It has user authentication. You can do some custom stuff with it if you want. And another thing I like about Adalo is the package. It's a really, really nice package. It's a much better package than AppGyver. So this is a tool I can see a lot more people using than, for instance, AppGyver, because it's a lot more user-friendly. On the other hand, the problem with Adalo is that if you're trying to build something a little bit more complex, you're trying to build a real app, okay, like a real, maybe a dating app or maybe like an Uber app, it's going to be painful. You might even get to a point where you're just going to give up because it's going to be painful. It's really not meant for that. It's really not, in my view, a tool where you're going to go out and build very complex apps. It's a great tool to kind of build your appointment or maybe a sample chat app or something like that. And so in my view, it's not really a tool you're going to go out and build complex, production-ready apps, dynamic apps, stuff like that. So while I like this tool, I'm going to give it a C because, you know, it has a lot of pros. It also has a lot of negatives as well. Now, the next tool we are going to be rating is Thunkable. Okay, Thunkable is a very unique tool. It's completely different than all the tools that I've talked about so far, and it's going to be different than most of the tools that I've reviewed on this channel, and probably going to be different than most of the tools that you guys have worked with or tried to build apps in. And so I've built a bunch of apps with Thunkable. I think it's really nice. And obviously one of the things that Thunkable does different than all the other tools is this block functionality when it comes to doing logic, okay? And you may like it, you may hate it, but it is different. My personal opinion is that they are oversimplifying something that, you know, a person needs to learn how to do. And personally, I think they oversimplify this logic a little too much, a little bit more than they needed to do. But I do realize that a lot of you are either gonna love this or you're gonna hate it. A lot of you are either gonna like just click with this, or many of you are just gonna be like, okay, this is not for me. Now, unfortunately, in my opinion, this is really where the benefits and kind of the uniqueness, the novelty, if you will, of this tool end, because everything else, you know, the way you build the UI, kind of all the other stuff, it leaves a lot to be desired. In many ways, I feel this tool was built very, very quickly. It's not polished at all. And, you know, I enjoy doing reviews with it, but I would never go out and actually build a real app using this tool. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this tool, I'm going to give it an E, because it's not a tool that I can see myself using in the future. The next tool I want to rate is Backendless. Now, this is a tool that I also kind of played with. I built a few apps with it. And the first thing about this tool is that there's a lot of things happening. Okay, when you log into the main screen, and I'm not really a huge fan of this UI. I think it definitely needs to be simplified. It needs to be polished up. But there's so many things happening. You have this backend. You have this front end, you have, you know, logic, you have components. There's lots and lots of things that you can do. And while that means that, you know, there's a lot of functionality with this tool, or at least they're trying to create the illusion that there's a lot of functionality, I'm not a big fan of this busy UI. Like, I'm not a huge fan. And, you know, some people may say like, well, you're not a power user and this is designed for power users. Well, I can give you a bunch of other tools that are more powerful than this, and they're just simpler to use. So for instance, take a look at this UI. Like, me personally, I'm not a huge fan of this UI. And another thing about this tool, it does remind me a lot of the previous tool, Thunkable, except it has a lot more stuff going on. But this UI, the way it looks, it reminds me of Thunkable, which I'm not really a big fan of. And it's kind of, you know, I don't know, it's kind of like a hassle. It's kind of annoying to kind of design it. But, you know, having said that, there's a lot of things, right? You have your users, you have data, you have files, you have messaging, like a lot of these things that don't need to leave on this left-hand side, right? Because a lot of people, they're just going to be using a couple of these things like data, maybe files. You don't need to have messaging there because not every app is going to have messaging, whereas most of your apps are gonna need data. You have something called a counter as well. I mean, why do we even need there? You have these app tables, a lot. So it seems like this is more like of some kind of a enterprise tool, because if I had to do like a very thorough video on this, it would be a very, very long video. And the other thing about this tool is that, 80% of the time, you're only going to be using like 20% of the features. So why even list all of these things here? And so, as you can probably guess, I'm not a huge fan of the tool. This is definitely not going to be a tool that I'm going to enjoy using. This is definitely not going to be a tool where I'm going to be like, can't wait to wake up and start building apps. Even though there's so many things that it can do, I think they can get rid of on like 90% of the stuff you see, the 90% of the UI stuff, and like tuck it away somewhere, under advanced functionality or some checkbox you click in order to see all that. So I can't say I'm a huge fan of this tool. Nevertheless, it is a powerful tool. It does a bunch of things that it's designed to do. So I'm going to be giving it an E. I'm not going to give it an F because there are things that it does. But this is not going to be a tool I'm going to be dying to use. The next tool I want to rate is FlutterFlow. Now, as you might have guessed, I've been using FlutterFlow for quite a while now. I've built all kinds of apps with FlutterFlow. I have ideas to build even more different apps, so you haven't seen nothing yet. And this tool is probably in the top 3 of the tools that I've used the most. And probably this is a tool where I've built the most apps. And this is a tool that I really, really like. And no, nobody's paying me to say it. This is my personal opinion. This is my personal viewpoint. One of the main reasons I like this tool is because it's based on Flutter. And Flutter, if you're not aware, is a industry standard when it comes to building cross-platform apps. So you can build an app for web, for mobile, iOS, Android, for desktop, etc., etc. And this is a framework that's used by a lot of big companies. It was developed at Google. And so that is a big, big plus. But even if you ignore that, right? Even if you don't, care, what it's really based on, there's still a lot of things to like about this tool. I like the UI. I think it's very intuitive. You can easily understand where things happen. I like the fact that you have a lot, these components here. You can just drag them and then you can, wire them to a database. You can connect some logic to them. I also like the fact that it has comprehensive support for Firebase, which is a standard when you're building apps because it gives you a ton of functionality. You have FirestoreDB. You have Firebase Crashlytics, you have Firebase Remote Config, and I've never seen that in many other tools. They recently introduced the ability to import Figma themes. Plus, you can go out, you can build custom functions, custom widget, custom action. And so you have various options when it comes to building your apps with FlutterFlow. You can just start by drag and dropping these components, connecting them to a database, giving them some simple logic. But you can also go out and you can write custom functions, custom widgets using the Flutter framework and make your app do pretty much anything that you want to do. So I really, really like this tool. I think this is an amazing tool. It does have a bunch of negatives, and namely that it takes a while to test an app. You have to wait for the test environment to spin up. It also takes a while to run the app. There can be some compatibility issues with the way you're previewing the app here and when you're actually previewing the app on your phone. But still, I believe the pros definitely outweighs any of the cons. And so this is definitely one of my favorite tools that I not only enjoy recommending to others, but I enjoy using this tool myself, as you've probably have seen me making lots and lots of videos with this tool. So I'm going to give this tool the S, which is the top ranking here. The next tool I want to rate is Bravo Studio, okay? And this is a very, very interesting tool. I actually did a video just recently about it. It works completely different than the tools that you're used to and the tools that I've reviewed so far. And so you're not going to be designing an app inside of this tool. You're going to design an app in Figma, which is another tool that a lot of designers use and has a big community, and you can clone designs that others have done that have made available inside the community. And so you can clone somebody else's more professional design. and use it as a template to build the app in this tool. Another thing that I really like about this tool is that for the most part, it's purely no code. And so you have your design, you import it here, you connect it to a database, and then if you need a little bit of logic, you also have the ability to do that. And so this makes the tool a little bit more limited compared to a tool such as Bubble, also compared to a tool such as FlutterFlow, which is very, very flexible. But I still like the way this works. I still like the simple UI. I like, the way that you can, create a new collection very, very easily, get data from an API very, very easily. So there's lots of things this tool can do. And in my view, this tool has a lot of potential. But right now, it's not going to be a tool I'm going to be using for building complex apps. It is a nice tool to build more simple apps. And so I'm going to give it a C because it's kind of similar to Adalo. It works very differently, but functionality-wise and kind of package-wise, it's very, very similar to Adalo. The next tool I want to rate is GlideApps. And GlideApps was actually one of the very first tools that I reviewed on this channel as well. And the thing about GlideApps is it's very, very different than all the no-code tools. This is not a tool that you're going to go out and build like a dating app. It's not a tool you're going to build like an Uber client, an Uber app. This is going to be a very simple tool that you can basically connect your data inside a spreadsheet or maybe some API and just display that data. And then you have a little bit of kind of functionality when it comes to kind of working with the data. You can change the way it looks. You can have a list. You can do a card. You can do grid. You can do a table. So you can kind of change the way this data looks. And so when you compare this tool to all the other tools, it's going to be very, very limited. But still, I kind of wanted to put it out there just to make sure you guys know that tools such as this exist. But obviously, this is not going to be a tool you're going to be building very, very complex apps. And so I'm going to give this tool a D because in many ways, it's a nice tool for what it does. So the package is on point, but it's not a tool that has, lots and lots of functionality, lots and lots of things that you can do in order to build very, very interesting apps. It's a very, very simple tool for building very, very simple projects. The next tool I want to rate is AppMaster, and AppMaster is a tool I actually reviewed recently on this channel. And in my view, this tool had a lot of potential. Okay, I looked at this promo animation here, this promo walkthrough, and I'm thinking to myself, I really like the UI. I really like the way it looks. I really like the way you can connect all of these things. Lots and lots of things that you can do with it. And then when I actually went inside and created a blank project and started to kind of work with it, I immediately realized that this tool is missing a bunch of things. A lot of things are not working. Like, for instance, this user template is not available. Even though this tool has been around for, I think, a couple of years at least, they still don't have this template functionality, whereas like almost all the other tools do have that. You don't have a wizard, so you have a blank project. I need to fill this out. But when you do that, you're going to see that there's a lot of things that don't work. A lot of things are just not intuitive. And so I had high hopes for this tool. But then when I started to use it, I'm like, this tool is just a pain. It's just a pain to work with. And while I was making my overview video on this tool, I wanted to give up a couple of times because just some things weren't working. I had to fix things. I had to change some settings. It was just an annoying tool. And on top of that, it feels like this tool was abandoned, or at least the development has slowed down. It doesn't feel like this tool is being actively developed. I could be wrong, but that is the feeling that I got. So I'm going to give this tool an F. I don't ever want to go back to that tool and kind of work with it. It was just a pain to deal with. The next tool we're going to be rating is FlutterWiz. This is kind of the icon for FlutterWiz. And FlutterWiz is a free drag and drop UI builder for Flutter apps. Okay, so it's kind of like FlutterFlow, where you're drag and dropping different elements and you're going to have a generated Flutter app, which is kind of what FlutterFlow does. But that is pretty much all this tool does, okay? It doesn't have any database support. It doesn't have much logic support. The purpose of this tool is to jumpstart a Flutter project, okay? So if you're building like a Flutter project, you would typically need to go out and do it manually. Okay, well, you can use this tool to do that. So I really like the idea for this tool. I really like that they do not promise that they're gonna do A, B, C, and D, but only do A barely. Okay, I really like that aspect. They tell you what this tool does and they deliver. So it's a very limited tool. You're not gonna build your next Uber app or your next dating app using this tool. This is a tool just to get started with, and that's pretty much all this tool does. And so let's go ahead and stick it into maybe this D category. Okay, it's nowhere at the level of these tools, but it's simpler and easier to use than these tools. So I think this is a good choice for it. The next tool we're going to be rating is Flux Builder. And this is another tool that's kind of based on the Flutter framework, but it's a different tool because number one, you need to download an app. And the way this tool works is that you need to connect this tool to something. Okay, so if you have a Shopify store, you can connect it to your Shopify store and you're going to have an app for your Shopify store. If you have a WordPress WooCommerce store, you can connect this tool to your WooCommerce app and you're going to have an app for your WooCommerce store. That's kind of the idea. It's really not a tool you're going to really go out and build like an Uber app or like a dating app or one of these dynamic apps, which is kind of why I got into NoCode, to build feature-rich apps. But I do realize that people have different requirements. They're trying to build different things. There's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to NoCode. And so this is the perfect tool only if you have those specific needs, right? Only if you're looking to integrate it with a WooCommerce store, OpenCart, Shopify, Magento, things like that. This is not going to be a tool where you're going to build any kind of app. So let's go ahead and give it a D rating, kind of similar to the previous tool, because even though the previous tool is very different, and in a way they're similar with their limitations. The next tool I want to talk about is Locofy. Okay, Locofy is very similar to Bravo Studio, where you are designing your template in Figma, you're importing it into Locofy, and then you are generating React components. You're generating raw React, JavaScript framework components. And so unlike some of the tools we talked about that generate, Flutter frameworks, this generates a different framework, but it kind of works the same way. And so this is another tool that you're going to be using if you need to jumpstart a project. This is a tool you're going to be using if you know a little bit of code, but you don't want to go out and design your app by hand. You don't want to go out and design your app in some, by hand in a development environment. You want to go out, design your app using a tool such as Figma, bring it back to Locofy, generate those components, and then take it from there, connect it to an API, connect it to a database and stuff like that. And so I think naturally we are going to give this a D as well, because these tools here are very similar in my view. The next tool I want to rate is Theta. Now, Theta is a very interesting tool. And right off the bat, I want to say I really like the UI. It's just pleasing. It's nice. I like the way this tool is built. So what is Theta? Theta is very similar to FlutterFlow, and that is it's also based on the Flutter framework, where you are building an app inside this web interface here, just like with FlutterFlow, and then it's going to go out and it's going to generate a project for you. And so once you start building a project, you're going to have this really nice UI, and this UI looks better than like 80% of the other UIs for all the other tools. So I really like the fact that it's so easy to use. They have this next steps, which is a nice touch. You have a CMS, which is a way of getting this data. You have authentication. You have some APIs here as well. And now when you decide to actually build the app, not only do you have these components that you could drag and drop, and I really like the way they make it look. I really like the look of this tool here. I think it's definitely one of my favorite. But you also have this diagram here that kind of gives you a view and shows you how your app is going to be interacting with the user. So, if you have a certain component, you can attach actions to it. It's very, very similar to FlutterFlow. Admittedly, it doesn't have all the feature set of FlutterFlow, but they've taken it a lot further than some of the other, Flutter generators like FlutterWiz and a bunch of others. And so I really like the UI. I think it's very, very intuitive. Now, I find this diagram here interesting. I don't know if I love it yet. Admittedly, I probably need to have a bigger screen in order to kind of navigate this more effectively, but I do like this touch. I do like the fact that they give you a lot of widgets and it's really nice UI. You have auth, you have authentication, but it's definitely not at the level of FlutterFlow. FlutterFlow is much beefier. FlutterFlow is like the king so far of these Flutter-based apps because they just keep adding and adding new and new features. But this is a close competitor, right? So in my view, this has a lot of potential. I think there's a ton of potential with this tool. And even so, I think some people are just going to be more comfortable with this tool than using something like FlutterFlow. I think people are, going to decide, okay, do I need all the features that FlutterFlow has, or am I going to be comfortable just, building an app with the widgets that they have here and the database access and all that, and then this diagram here. And so even though FlutterFlow is beefier, it has more functionality, has more features, I'm not going to downplay this tool because, I can definitely see a lot of people using this tool as well. And so let's think about how we are going to be rating it. I'm going to give it a B. I don't think it's quite at the level of Bubble. It's definitely not at the level of FlutterFlow, but it's definitely more feature-rich than some of the tools here. Last but not least, I want to review App Machine. Okay, App Machine is a tool I recently did a video on. It's a very, very interesting tool that definitely warrants your attention. Here's the landing page: build powerful apps without writing code, the NoCode platform to build apps for iOS, Android, and the web. And here we have a sample app. Okay, and this is kind of what the app looks like. You have data, you can connect, you can create your tables here, fields, settings. You also have web services, so you can get data from the outside, from some third parties. And then we have content here, and here I have this kind of block editor. And immediately when I looked at this, I started to think to myself, is this similar to those other block tools such as Thunkable and Backendless? But then I couldn't really figure out how to use it. I figured out that these are actually the pages here, and I can add a block, and there's lots and lots of blocks that, allow you to do other things. There's advanced. I can click on all, lots and lots of blocks, and you can immediately see what these blocks do. So a really novel way of kind of building this tool. Very nice start. I also kind of like the UI. It's fairly simple. It's not as complex as Backendless. I can easily pick the navigation style. This is a very, very simple app builder. And when I started to play with it, it immediately reminded me of GlideApps. In fact, I think it has pretty much almost the same functionality as GlideApps, because when I started looking at this, I realized that GlideApps also lets you create a different navigation bar, navigation style. You can customize things. So maybe it has a couple of features that GlideApps does not have, and then GlideApps has features that it does have. But that is kind of the way I look at this tool. It's going to be in the same category as GlideApps. This is obviously not going to be a tool you're going to be building your next billion-dollar dating app. This is not going to be a tool you're going to be building an Uber client. This is going to be a simple tool where you might just pull some data from some third-party API, or maybe have data stored locally and just display it, or in different ways. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and give it the same rating as GlideApps, okay? So these are our tools. Let's quickly take a look and see where our ratings stand now that we've talked about all the tools, and see if we can make any changes. At the top, we have FlutterFlow, and I really don't see any competitors to FlutterFlow, at least from where I'm coming from, at least with the functionality that FlutterFlow and the ease of use that it has and all the benefits that it can provide to you. Next, we have Bubble, and I've given it an A rating, and I think that's a fair rating. It's a great tool, awesome tool, but I do prefer FlutterFlow for its flexibility, some of the things it allows you to do. Next, we have AppGyver and Theta. So AppGyver is a tool that I mention how, it has a lot of functionality, but in many ways it's an underrated tool, but in other ways it's not as polished as some of the other tools. So we're going to give it a B. It's definitely not at a bubble level. And then we have Theta here, and Theta is also a great tool, lots of functionality, not at the level of FlutterFlow, but a lot better than some of the other tools. At the C level, we got Adalo and Bravo Studio, different tools, but yet similar in kind of this overall feel and in the way they behave, in the way they allow you to do things. Next, we have GlideApps, we have FlutterWiz, and then we have a bunch of these other tools. And these are the tools that are nice. They have potential, but as you get to this area here, there's a lot more kind of negatives than positives, okay? And so when you're looking at this area here, you really need to make sure that you need to be using these tools for your specific objectives. Next, we got Thunkable and Backendless. Now, Thunkable has that novelty with the blocks that you really don't see with a lot of these other tools. And Backendless is the busiest UI I've ever seen. And I'm not doubting that it has a lot of features and a lot of functionality. But the fact of the matter is that you can achieve what Backendless aims to show you in a very, very simplified way, in a very, very simplified manner. And so I really wasn't impressed by either of these tools. And these are tools I'm definitely not going to be using going forward. Last but not least, we have AppMaster. This is a tool that I was the most frustrated when I was doing that general overview video. I knew I had to make that video. I knew I had to kind of show you guys how this tool works. But man, I almost gave up like 3 or 4 times because it's a very, very annoying tool. And it's also a tool that I like the least of pretty much all the tools that I've reviewed so far. And so there you have it. This is my rating for the no-code tools that I've been using and reviewing this year as well as the previous years. And this is also going to be going into the next year as well. And so I really hope you've gotten value in this video. Now, if you're looking to really amp up your no-code knowledge, you're looking to take your no-code knowledge to the next level, you're looking to really, really improve it in the next year and beyond, then you definitely need to check out my Patreon page. If you are enjoying the content here, then you're going to enjoy even more the content I put out on my Patreon page. Not only will you be able to view and or clone all the apps that I built with FlutterFlow as well as with all of these other app builders, but you also get extra content such as Q&As, live streams, masterclasses, as well as behind the scenes content in terms of what motivates me of making these different videos and also what's in store in the future for this channel. I recently did an in-depth masterclass. I think that video was over an hour long where I talked about a certain functionality inside FlutterFlow that a lot of people have been having problems with. And judging by the comments and a lot of feedback, a lot of people have gotten a bunch of value from that masterclass. And I'm planning other masterclasses in the future as well. And so not only will you get a ton of value, but by joining my Patreon community, you will be supporting this channel and supporting my work. So if you're not yet a member, I do hope to see you there real soon. And so if you enjoyed this video, give this video a fat like, leave a comment below letting me know if you agree with my assessment or if you would have ranked some of these tools differently than I did. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you real soon.